Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse was interviewed today on CNBC's Squawk Alley. And he was talking about what he called Silicon Valley arrogance, and I'll get into what he means on that in just a moment here, but he was talking about things from a regulatory perspective primarily. He also put out a string of 4 tweets today about congressional hearings and is pertaining largely to Libra, Facebook's Libra coin. Also, United States Secretary of Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, he essentially said that the United States dollar is not used for illicit things such as money laundering. I'll get into that. There's more to it, but I'll get into that in this video. And then I'm going to close out the video by running through a back and forth, a little Twitter debate between Galgatron and a Twitter handle called XRP Validators. Both of them seem to have a fair bit of knowledge of the XRP ledger from a technical perspective. Both are pro-XRP, and both had a disagreement on how it functionally works. And I find this type of thing fascinating because I got to say, I think that most people in the XRP community don't really understand the technology side of XRP, and I count myself among those people. I really do, I got to be honest. So I understand the big picture stuff and how it works, and I have a very loose understanding of how the technology works. And so anytime I have an opportunity to run through this stuff, I read through it. And the way that I've been treating things just for the last year and 8 months that I've been in crypto and learning intensely since then on a daily basis, quite literally, is I'll read through stuff, and even if I don't fully understand what I'm reading, what I found is the more I read and read and read on a regular basis, the pieces start to come together, and then I'll recall things from previous conversations. And so that's why for those of you that are interested on hanging on towards the end of the video when I do get that piece of the content, if you stick with me for a long time on the good old Moon Lambo channel, things are going to start to make sense, and you and I can actually learn together because, frankly, I don't know everything. I'd like to. I'm going to try to get there. I'll never get there, but I'm going to try to get there. So I think it's fun to kind of piece these things together. But the technical side is rather complex. But that's how I got to know the rest of the stuff and understand Ripple's plan and the technologically who's building on top of the XRP ledger, this and that. It's the reason that I'm able to speak just off the cuff without really, there's not a crazy amount of planning that goes into what I say. It's off the top of my head because I know the stuff that well, but it didn't happen overnight. It's because I keep reading and reading and reading. I want to get to the point where I'm like that on the XRP technology side. I'm just not quite there yet. So I'm just being open and honest. Thought I'd share it with you, and hopefully you find that type of content interesting as well. But let's go ahead and dive in here. Oh, first though, I got to say, if you would please delicately tap that like button. And if you're a fan of Ripple and XRP, you know what to do. Subscribe. Thank you. All right, so now into the content. So here's a tweet from Squawk Alley. This is the CNBC account, one of them anyway. They tweeted out, Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse joins us to discuss Facebook's Libra and how the company can make this a beneficial process. And then here's a quote. This is a quote from Brad Garlinghouse that occurred during this interview. On the macro level, it's been good for the world. There may be some Silicon Valley arrogance in the approach to this. And that sounded like a little bit of a slam. It was kind of fun to hear it. What he was talking about, it was on the topic of Facebook's Libra. And he was talking about how essentially they're coming to market, they put out their white paper, and sure, the coin's not released yet. Maybe if this all passes and get over the regulatory hurdles, maybe it'll launch in a year. We'll see if it ever happens. I'm not opposed to this whatsoever. I say, hey, go for it. It's a walled garden, but hey, freaking go for it, dude. Brings more attention to the forefront as far as it pertains to cryptocurrencies. But as far as Libra, Brad was just saying, as far as the regulatory hurdles, yeah, they didn't really maybe go through the proper channels to try and speak with the correct people prior to just saying, hey, we're going to do this thing and putting it out there. And that's what he was, when he said Silicon Valley arrogance, that's what he was really referring to. But since he was specifically highlighting Facebook's Libra, I thought, ooh, wow, it makes me wonder if he's on a little fight with somebody over at Facebook. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Possibly, yeah. But regardless, that's the point that he had to stay on that. And another piece that I found rather interesting in this interview, because I did not realize this, but you know that Facebook is not the only entity involved with the Libra coin. So eventually, the whole plan is to have it, and we'll still see if this happens, if the coins even launch, but they want it to be decentralized. They have a 5-year plan to make it go from centralized to decentralized. But so there's these entities, though, that are launching it from the central point. and they signed. I can't remember if I heard. I don't know if I misheard. It might have said 20 or 28. It was something like. It doesn't matter to make the point though. But there were a bunch of entities that signed on to be a part of Libra coin from the beginning. And what Brad said, and again I found this quite fascinating. Not one of them was a bank. Not one of them. And then I can't remember if I heard this. No, I don't think I did. But I take it back. I do remember hearing this when he was giving his testimony the other day. David Marcus, Facebook head of Calibra, and he's the one that came up with the name for Libra, the coin, actually, by the way. He said that, I can't remember the exact words, so I'm going to have to paraphrase it, but he was basically saying that, entities like Western Union that engage in remittances around the world, they should be concerned, and that basically they're coming for you. And so maybe that's what he was referring to when he was talking about Silicon Valley arrogance, though. But they're talking about essentially taking down traditional means of moving money around the world. And Brad Garlinghouse said that is a call to action, and of course it caught everybody's attention. So I found that fascinating as well. Now let me get into the 4 tweets that he sent out today. It's all in the same thing. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4 here. And it begins with, I'm heartened by the largely thoughtful dialogue from this week's congressional hearings on Libra. Committee members are supportive of blockchain and payments innovation in the United States, but skeptical that Facebook is the right steward given the history of broken trust. And by the way, just on that, before I read the other 3 tweets, that was 1 of 4. I got to say, the first time I was ever talking about Libra coin on this channel, I went down to the comment section, and it seemed like every comment had to do with just comments along the lines of, yeah, I would never trust Facebook. Never. I don't use Facebook as a result of this. There's no trust, whatever, this and that, would never give them my money. And I wasn't prepared for that. And I don't blame any of you for feeling that way. Obviously, Facebook, they haven't earned trust, right? No, I don't think so anyway. And I don't really, I don't use Facebook, so I don't really care at this point. I did back in college, but anyway, I just wanted to say, I really was surprised by the feedback that I was getting, and to that degree. And I don't know that I saw one person. I didn't. No, there wasn't one single pro comment for Facebook and Libra coin in the comment section of that particular video. So I'm with you guys. I got to say that I am with you. I share your concerns. Anyway, here's the second tweet in this thread here from Brad Garlinghouse. This debate is healthy and necessary for the continued maturation of this industry. We need to ask and answer the tough questions, ensure our systems are battle-tested, and have the proper oversight and regulations in place to protect consumers. To paraphrase Congressman Patrick McHenry, whether Facebook is involved or not, change is here. Digital currencies exist. Blockchain technology is real. So the question then becomes, what are American policymakers going to do to meet the challenges and the opportunities of this new world of innovation? Very good point. Exactly. You can't put the genie back in the bottle, as we said before. So it really comes down to thoughtful regulation, and that's why I've always appreciated Ripple being the adults in the room, because even though it's not that XRP is their coin, certainly not, it is decentralized, they've been very proactive, even though the coin isn't theirs, taking all the information that they have about the technology to the legislators and saying, hey, we want to do this the right way. We do want thoughtful, proper regulation for the entire asset class, and so they do want XRP regulated as well. And so again, it's just all about taking a thoughtful approach. And so that's why when you contrast that with Facebook's approach to, hey, we're doing this, suck it, Like, when you look at it like that, I'm just like, okay, Silicon Valley arrogance, I got you, Brad. I know what you're talking about here. I hear exactly what you are saying on that topic. And then there is this piece. This one kind of like made me go, what? It was Joe Kernan tweeted this out. He was on CNBC interviewing Steve Mnuchin. He is the United States Secretary of the Treasury here. And the tweet here is, and this is a quote from, I don't know if this wasn't literally a quote, but this is what the way that he perceived what Steve Mnuchin says. That's the way that I read this. So here's the tweet from Joe Kernan, and it says, and this is a non sequitur, which is hilarious to me: the existing system has never been used for illicit activities, but we're going to make sure crypto isn't used for illicit activities like the current system. And then he writes, got it, because it makes no sense. And here's the actual tweet from Squawk Box, what they said: are you saying cash has never been used for illicit purposes? at Joe Squawk, which is Joe Kernan, asks in response to Mnuchin's concerns about Bitcoin. And then here's the quote from Steve Mnuchin: "We are going to make sure that Bitcoin doesn't become the equivalent to Swiss-numbered bank accounts." And it was astonishing to me because Joe he made a perfectly valid point, and he said that, he brought up the concern, okay, Bitcoin, yeah, of course you don't want to use for illicit purposes, money laundering, this and that, whatever. But he says, but that's what cash has been used for, right? And then at one point, Steve Mnuchin goes, "Look, no, Joe, I've got to push back on that. That's not what's happening here. We're fighting that every day. I got to push back on that. It's not what it's used for." And I'm paraphrasing at that point, but he said that we got to make sure that Bitcoin isn't used for that. And I'm just like, mind blown. What are you talking about? Bitcoin is the worst means in just about the entire world to engage in illicit activities. It tracks movements. You can absolutely thread together a string of transactions. But with paper money, nope. That's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to do that. And it's so ridiculous, so absurd that I don't know how he could believe what he's saying. That's how stupid this is. I don't know how he could possibly believe it. And so I don't know that I believe that he believes it. That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to have to leave it at that because it is that absurd. Usually I like to take people at their word, but sometimes somebody says something that's so stupid and so out there, it makes me question if they're actually saying what they actually believe to be true in that particular instance. So I don't know. Take it for what it's worth. That's good old Moon Lambo's take on it, y'all. All right, and the last piece I wanted to cover today, and this is fascinating, and by the way, I like how this ended because it made me laugh. Only because it made me laugh. All right, the way that Galgatron ended this, now we'll get to it. I got to make sure. Okay, so I'm scrolled to the top here. And so this thread, it looks like it ended about 15 minutes ago, right before I hit record. I got the most recent tweet from Galgatron, and you might laugh at the last thing I said, so I'll share that with you at the tail end of this, of course. But this actually started yesterday. But you know with Twitter how it is. You respond, you don't know when the next person's going to go back. And so a lot of these threads that I share with you, they happen sometimes over a span of days or longer. So this one's been going back since yesterday anyway. There's a tweet from an account called XRP Validators, and I was already following them, and they describe themselves as a project focused on development of the XRP ledger not affiliated with Ripple. Okay, but cool. So obviously pro-XRP people like that. And it caught Galgatron's attention here, and so he tweeted out this link here, and XRP Validators responded, which is what got the party started here. And they wrote, "The only validators identified are the ones that submitted this for themselves here." Okay. Galgatron responds to XRP Validators: "The only validators that matter are the UNL nodes. The rest are effectively backup / ancillary / private / irrelevant to the stability / persistence of the XRP ledger." And so XRP Validators responds to that: "That's a common fallacy. The XRPL is permissionless without any authority. Each participant picks which others to include in their node list. By UNL, you mean the one put out by Ripple, but anyone can recommend a unique node list." Okay, so the last part, too, anybody can recommend a unique node list. Okay, but Galgatron responded, the base UNL that defines XRP ledger is largely consistent across validators, requiring a large overlap to avoid fragmentation. Doesn't matter what Ripple publishes. If validators add additional nodes to their own UNL, those nodes will not contribute to consensus, just redundancy." And then XRP Validators responded, "There is no base UNL. Each validator operator chooses which validators to add to their UNL to attempt to reach consensus, with ignoring those not added to their list." And Galgatron responds, "By base, I'm referring to the UNL overlap." And so then he retweeted something from Dr. T, who is MIA, hasn't been around 4 or 5 months or something like that. "We miss you, Dr. T, come back." Anyway, and then it states here, every pair of nodes needs 41% overlap of the average size of the respective UNLs, but this is a safety condition under Byzantine accountability and no asynchrony. 80% should prevent forks normally. And I actually had forgotten that until I'm sitting here reading this right now. I forgot that every pair of nodes does need 41% overlap of the average size of the respective UNLs. And that's because I don't see enough of the technical side. Most of what I'm reading on Twitter, frankly, it's not from a tech perspective, and that's probably why I know less about it. I should probably seek out more of this, frankly, because I have read that specific point before, but I completely forgot it until I read it right now. Anyway, and so XRP Validators responds, "Yes, the overlap is very important to ensure validators do not fork, But it's the list individual nodes use that matters. Unless you know what list the UNL nodes are running, you never know which nodes influence them. And Galgatron responds to that, doesn't matter for consensus. Example, a validator might reach consensus A because of the UNL they chose. The rest of the validators reach consensus B and wins by 80% majority. So then, in that case, scenario A is discarded. Their unique node list entries, the UNL entries, don't impact the ledger. Hence, a recommended list, not a free-for-all. And I think what they're largely getting at is this a free-for-all or is it not? That seems to me what the bulk of this is here. And XRP Validators responds, the only thing that matters to each node for them to reach consensus is the validators on their list. This really is an unprivileged free-for-all. Anyone is free to promote a UNL made of those they choose to be part of their network. And then Galgatron writes, incorrect. I like that. I can appreciate the bluntness, though. When he does this type of stuff, I just take him at his word. Some people get offended by the bluntness, but I think it kind of cuts through and it's useful. So I don't know, just my take anyway. But anyway, she writes, incorrect. One validator may reach a different consensus from another validator if their UNLs differ enough. This means that despite their own consensus, either they capitulate and accept the 80% agreed on consensus from other nodes, or they fork. There's only one XRP ledger. Right? And XRP Validators responds. And then he's like, incorrect? And then he continues. You say one validator may reach a different consensus from another validator if their unique node lists differ enough. This is literally because the only thing that matters to each node is the nodes on their list. Still, you can't make assumptions about UNLs being used. And Galgatron responds, so validator A reaches consensus A, and validator B reaches consensus B, who was correct. And then XRP Validators responds, they are both now on separate chains, and anyone else would have to decide which they choose to join. And then Galgatron responds to that. So, you agree then that UNLs have to be quite similar to avoid forking, which means the UNLs are not a free-for-all, because if someone lets too many other nodes in their UNL, they could fork. And then XRP Validators responded, who is the privileged party when it comes to UNLs? Galgatron responds, that also is determined by manual consensus. Historically, Ripple's suggested unique node list has proven acceptable by the validators and thus adopted. If they no longer felt that way, they'd collude to reach another UNL sharing method. And nobody does have to use Ripple's UNL, of course. And XRP Validators responds, which validator do you know adopted the UNL? And then Galgatron, this is interesting because I should have mentioned this up front. So Galgatron, he tagged at Rabbit Kit Club. He also tagged Cites Wind, who is the creator of XRP Tipbot, and he was also the founder of XRPL Labs, which is funded through Ripple's Spring Initiative. So that's cool stuff. Anyway, so he tagged them. He said, are your validators using the Ripple UNL? If so, any changes? And Cites responded, yes, we are, and no changes. Had some back in the days, but now the manual editions are on the UNL anyway. I'll be adding a few soon, though. Galgatron then responded, thanks, Cites Wind. And this serendipitously demonstrates an excellent example of how the validators contribute to the shared UNL and are not being forced by Ripple into anything, which is a key point, because that's an argument that you'll see time and again. Anytime you do come across a tech argument, it seems like one of the primary complaints is that you have to use Ripple's unique node list and they control the network, this and that, and it is absolute hogwash. It is not true. Anyway, so that XRP Validators responds, what happened to only the validators on the Ripple UNL being the only ones that count? All right, and then Galgatron responded that he meant towards consensus. And then XRP Validators responds again, but it's just your assumption unless you know who validators put in their UNLs. That's the point. It's a permissionless protocol. Privilege does not exist. Trust must be earned. And here's how it ended. And this did make me chuckle. Galgatron responded, I'm done with this ridiculous conversation. You are an idiot. So I was like, okay. So that devolved, but that's okay. I still like you, Galgatron. That's good. Whatever. I'm not even picking sides on all this stuff. I'm really not. I just think I like reading through this type of thing. Normally, I have a firm opinion when I share one of these Twitter threads with you. frankly, when it comes to the tech stuff, I'm not going to jump in and pretend that I understand everything that I just read through. I just think it's valuable to read through it, hear it, and then as you read through more and more and more stuff like this, the pieces do start to come together, so there is value in this. So even if me reading through this, some of the stuff didn't make sense, it doesn't matter. It's still useful if you keep ingesting this type of content, and then before it, you're going to be walking encyclopedia on this stuff. It just takes time, a little bit of time anyway. So that's kind of where I am at that. That's all I got for this particular video. Hope you liked it. And I'm not a financial advisor. Do not buy or sell anything because of anything that I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo!